Okay, I'm a little bit worried about the Phoenix housing market, and here's why. Every time things have changed in the housing market, I start seeing it in my business first. And right now, I'm starting to see a lot of new listings. Why that worries me is because there's also some indication that buyer demand is not coming up as quickly along with that. So, although things have been on a really positive trajectory as far as the data has been showing lately, I think we may start to see a little bit of a slowdown, maybe a leveling off, but let's see what the data says. So this article here, AZ Big Media says Phoenix home sale time on market sees second biggest decrease in the US. So this is another positive indicator of things picking up in the housing market. They're saying the number of homes actively for sale was notably higher compared to last year, growing by 7.9%. So this article does talk about days on market, but it's also noting that there are more homes on the market, growing by 7.9%. Now, let's look at what's going on in Phoenix as far as the number of homes for sale goes, or active listings. This purple line is where we're at today in 2024. And if you'll notice, every pattern we have here at the beginning of the year is listings start to go down, right? In 2023, we started around 15,000 and we're just trending downward. In 2022, we kind of stayed, we went down a little bit, kind of stayed the same. 2021, we definitely didn't see anything increasing. And even in 2020, everything was going down until the pandemic started and things went a little wonky. But here we are in 2024 and listings have only been increasing. Now, while listings have been low, and of course, going up is, a reasonable direction based on where we're coming from, it's still a different pattern than what we've seen in the past. And like I said, this is in line with what I'm seeing in my business. And typically the trends that I start to feel with my clients are the trends that end up playing out in the marketplace. So they're talking about the number of days on market has gone down, which really indicates that we have more buyers out there and the buyer demand is increasing. And so I wanted to take a look at what we have going on too with days on market. And that is correct. We have seen days on market decrease since the beginning of the year. We're sitting right now at about 28 days on market. That's the median for the overall Phoenix area. Different price points, this number is different, as well as different areas of the valley. We see different days on market, but generally the trend has been going down. So in terms of buyer demand, that's good news. As a seller out there, you're seeing that there's likely more buyers getting homes under contract, and that number of days on market is getting less and less. But the news with mortgage rates isn't really that positive lately. We were on like a really good path for a while of rates continuing to go down and positive news for mortgage rates. And now we're not seeing quite as much of that. So here's where we stand as of last week. And, while it's minimal, if you can kind of see this on my screen, we have had a bit of an uptick over the last few weeks in rates. We're not as high as we were back in October. We're not as high as the small peak that we saw here. At the beginning of February, we're a little bit lower than that. But last week, rates were a bit volatile, and we haven't seen these big dips like we had seen in January, which was really starting to spur a lot more buyer demand. So what's going on this week? Well, I'm recording this on Monday. You guys will see this on Tuesday when the CPI comes out. Last Friday, we had CPI revisions, and that was all good news. Basically, what happened with the revision is that inflation was confirmed to be exactly what it had been reported last year for 2023. So there weren't any big changes. Therefore, that didn't really affect markets and affect mortgage rates. But the CPI reading on Tuesday could potentially be a market mover. So if you're listening to this right now and watching this, you probably already know what happened with CPI. But if you're a buyer, you may want to check with your lender and see if it moved rates one way or the other, for good or bad, because depending on how that comes out, it could change where we stand with mortgage rates. Now, this article from Barron's is talking about how home buying season is here. And that's because the spring is usually the busiest time of year for most markets throughout the country. But this article is saying that we may have a bumpy road ahead. It could be because of strong economic data paired with the Fed, delays in interest rate cuts, could send the 10-year Treasury yield higher, and that could then make mortgage rates higher, which would weaken housing demand. So they're talking about some early signs of this brewing, talking about what the Mortgage Bankers Index is tracking as far as loan applications. They're lower than a year ago. Some lenders have reported an increase in those seeking pre-qualifications, but long story short, in this article, there isn't a whole lot of good news about buyer demand or, a very strong faith that this recovery is happening, that we're going to see this strong spring buying season. They do mention that touring activity has been increasing, as according to Redfin and what they've been tracking, and consumer sentiment is higher than it's been in a long time. For the first time in our National Housing Survey's history, a greater share of consumers believe mortgage rates will decrease over the next year rather than increase. That's according to Fannie Mae. So that is some good news, but it just still doesn't seem like these home buyers are out there ready to go as many expected to see. So what's going on in the Phoenix area? Let's dig into that and see what we have as far as demand and supply. Before I get there, if any of this is helpful, make sure you hit that like button and share with someone who would find it valuable. So I'm looking at listings under contract first, because this is really what our demand looks like. And this little teal line here is 2024 so far. And you can see we started off pretty strong, but this last week was tapering off a bit from that strength. And the Cromford report is saying that last year we saw a 60.6% growth in listings under contract as of today. But this year we're seeing a growth of 59.9%, very slightly worse, but yet it is worse. So this is a little bit, I guess, disappointing to see as far as what we talked about a few weeks ago. Everything indicating a pretty strong start to the year. We were getting a lot more buyer activity, listings under contract. And now that, I don't know, it just feels like it might be starting to slow down. I could be wrong, but as of right now, it feels like the amount of listings on the market is going to outpace the demand. And that's just what I'm feeling and seeing. The Cromford report is saying altogether, there's not too much to get excited about if you're longing for positive movement. On the other hand, there's also not much to get excited about if you're hoping for the market to crash. So we don't have good news for anyone, I guess, is the bottom line here. So let's look at what's going on with the Cromford Market Index. If you're new here, any number over 110 is considered a seller's market. So we are in a seller's market technically here. But what I've been looking at most recently is the difference between supply and demand. And we haven't had a whole lot of movement with either of them. And when they do move, they're moving up together. So we've just been hanging out in this number of 117 around there for a few weeks. Not much change and really just not much excitement going on right now. So if we take a look at every major city throughout the Phoenix area and their CMI, you're seeing a few more red arrows this week than we had last week. That means those cities moved in a direction favorable for buyers. They lost the momentum for sellers. Now, all of these, Fountain Hills is still well into a seller's market, if you remember anything over 110 technically. So Scottsdale also a seller's market. Surprise and Goodyear are in balanced markets according to the CMI. So nothing is too dire here, but they are moving in a direction more favorable to buyers than sellers, whereas the last few weeks we've seen pretty much everything gaining ground for sellers. So those are some areas to watch. The overall change, the average change month over month for all of these cities was an 8.1% increase, which last week was 10.5%. So therefore that's showing that we've lost some momentum in terms of the move towards more of a seller's market. This is really not what sellers want to see this time of year. We usually see a bit more strength. And we have a few weeks, I think, until we'll know for sure if we're going to see that spring buying season pick up. But usually right after Super Bowl or kind of around that time frame, we're really starting to see that buyer demand pick up and the number of homes on the market going under contract faster than they can be added to the market. One of the things that the Cromford Report calls out is that Paradise Valley actually has over 200 active listings without a contract, and that's for the first time since 2020. So you can see Paradise Valley on this list here. It's in a balanced market technically. It hasn't had much change, but usually we're going to see more homes under contract there, especially right now. Luxury does very well during our spring season here. So it'll be interesting to watch Paradise Valley and see if anything changes there. Altogether, we have about 10 cities that are sellers markets, Peoria up to Chandler. And then we have a few in balanced markets, Paradise Valley, Surprise, and Goodyear. And then Queen Creek, Buckeye, and Maricopa are all in buyers markets. So sellers, if you've been considering selling your home and you've been waiting till we pick up a lot of momentum in this spring buying season, I can't promise you that that's what's going to happen. I can feel that things are starting to pick up, but I also know that I'm hearing from a lot of sellers ready to list their homes. So that competition might get a little stiff. Buyers, this might be good news for you. You may not have as much competition out there, and you actually might have some options with the listings coming to the market. So if that's your situation, check the description below for our home buyer resources, and you may want to check out this video where I talk about how to choose the right neighborhood for you.